Hello, everybody. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Georgiana.
And this is Wholehearted Loving, where we teach you simple tools for self-love and compassion to grow the muscles you need to be with big feelings, triggers, and overwhelming sensations in your body.
Whether you have active challenges in your life or relationships, or whether you're just here to learn to be kinder to yourself, we pull out all the little things that make life feel better, the things that give you a sense of hope and direction.
So if you're too hard on yourself or on others,
if you want to feel real, deep connection in your life and relationships,
even if you want to reprogram your inner critic while you're sleeping,
this is a great place to be.
So welcome, and we hope this episode brings you just the tidbit you needed today.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 100. Woo-woo. We're going to talk about how we got over ourselves enough to do this and learned to trust our bodies and the message enough to go from not podcasters to podcasters with 100 episodes. Woot woot! You can find self-reflection prompts for this episode and every episode on our Instagram at Wholehearted Loving, and you can learn more about us and how to practice with us live on our website at wholeheartedloving.com. Before we get started, we'll do a body-based self-connection practice to connect with ourselves before we connect with each other and this podcast.
So, it's episode 100. I feel like that's celebratory.
Woot woot!
Wondering where it all began, like our frame of mind when we were just in the beginning stages. So, I feel like the body practice today, I want to let it be inspired by celebration. So, how would you move your body if there's something to celebrate? And if you're watching, we're both wiggling. And it's funny because I don't know. I'm sort of thinking I wouldn't wiggle with people when I'm celebrating, but actually when I get honest with myself and I look at stuff, I'm like, oh, I think I do wiggle when I'm excited.
We all do.
So whatever that is for you, how does your body take on the shape or movement of someone who's celebrating? And there's a lot of wiggling in mine. And notice whether that's clear to you, whether there's resistance to doing that for no reason, or just resistance to any type of movement or expression that is connected to celebration for you. That might uncover something for you. Maybe you realize, oh, I actually don't spend that much time moving my body, allowing my face and my sounds to be in the space of celebration very often. I think my old self did not let my body embody any type of celebration that often. I don't think my mind did much celebrating. I was just always focused on the goal. Interestingly enough, though, before I reached the goal, I already sensed I would reach the goal, and I already was planning the next goal. So very performance based. There was never any celebration throughout, as in let's enjoy the ride, the journey. And there definitely wasn't a celebration of, holy crap, I did the thing that was so hard for me before, or I thought would be so hard for me, and I did the thing.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend one time, and we worked on this a little bit together, and my hands automatically went up like this. And if you're not watching, what I'm doing is waving my palms around. And the expression of words at the time was, look at me, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And it's such a childlike thing to do. Children who are self-expressed, who feel safe to really just be in their experience, do a lot of look at me, and they're so thrilled at whatever that new thing is that they've discovered that they can do. And I realize I've never I don't have a history of really living in that energy, whether as a child or a teen or an adult. And so I made it a practice to move my body in that way more, make the sounds of celebration more, declare it out loud more. Look at me, I did it. I did the thing. Right?
Yes.
So, yeah.
This brings to mind Stuart from Mad TV. Are you familiar with Stuart? So it's the grown man dressed like a little boy. He's pretending to be a little boy, and he's got his doting mother, his very overly doting mother. And his whole thing is going, look at me! Look at what I can do! And then he'll do something just like kick his leg in the air and be like, look at me! And I think we all delight in that for the very, the silly reasons, but also I think it taps on something that's intrinsic within us, like wanting to celebrate, not being allowed to celebrate, looking silly, celebrating something that's not worth celebrating, I think if this is a challenge for you, dear listener or viewer, the homework I would offer you is a week of celebrations where you celebrate. Like, I like to go to the silly extremes to highlight this and really integrate it. So anytime anything, like I took out the garbage, like celebrate, like overly celebrate. There's generally no harm in celebrating, although you can certainly encounter people who wish to quash your celebration, in which case you might not want to do this celebration homework in front of them. Keep it for yourself. That's okay too. But cultivate it. It feels really good.
Or celebrate in front of them anyways. Right?
Yeah.
Like that might be the step of thing to practice. This is actually, I love that you're talking about this. I've been listening to a book called Tiny Habits, and I love what the author talks about in the book because it's stuff that we're intuitively doing. You and I, we've been practicing, we're sharing with other people to practice. But I think he's done and researched the science behind it, which I don't have time to do and I'm not that interested in doing. But you're talking about the dopamine hit that comes from celebration, like through your sound, through your words, through your body language, through movement. I mean, yeah. So, and how significant it is, they've noticed that people who make it a habit, like a learned habit for most people, to be like, I did the laundry, woohoo! And feel that in their body for a moment, actually have way more success developing, creating, sustaining new habits that serve them in their life.
Yeah, no doubt.
And when we work with people, when we first work with people, a lot of people realize I'm not good at celebration at all in any form. In like just acknowledging it with words. I don't actually even see what the celebration is, let alone can like find the words to acknowledge it. They definitely don't embody celebration in any way. It's weird, awkward, uncomfortable. And watching how that shifts over time and how it creates momentum for them in lives to be able to do all these things that were once hard things. Because they learned how to celebrate the tiny things. And I don't know, I think it's pretty cool. So
it's so cool. We're so quick with our own inner critics and our own like inner super champions who should do more and better all the time. But what this is bringing to mind for me is a happy wagging dog. Like the difference in your body when you're faced with a happy wagging dog that wants to give you some love versus, so if this was if our inner critic responded like a happy wagging dog, instead of offering us like, oh, well, you could have done better, you should do more, or like, what bad thing might happen now? We could be celebrating in those moments. It just like anything else we're doing, it takes a bit of conscious intention and a bit of practice. And I think noticing the difference in your body there can help. How do you feel when you encounter, you accomplish some tiddly little pittance that you don't even give much credence to, and somebody says, wow, that's awesome, versus like, oh, well, that wasn't, so what? Or
yes. And I already, from our conversation now, I'm like, I know what I want our ending body practice for this episode to be. We're going to wag our tails.
Oh, great.
But like, I want to come back to like the importance of celebration and also the timing of it. Like, so we talked about the importance of it, the like when to do it in terms of do it for even the tiniest things and do it right away. Because the brain and how it's wired, like if we celebrate right away, it links the habit or that thing, the action you did with that dopamine hit, with that like, oh, that sense of pride. right? So many people we work with, myself included, when I first started, I didn't really know what it felt like to live in the feeling of pride, like in my body. It felt like shameful to like see yourself that way. It felt, like I don't want to be the center of attention. I just want to be humble and modest. And all of that led to, I don't even know what it's like to feel pride in my body. And because I didn't know what it's like to feel it, I didn't get to enjoy it. And it's so much fun to get to say, oh my gosh, I went to the gym today for 15 minutes. That's amazing. And in the past, I would have deemed that a failure.
Yeah.
Like,
and
all
you
you
would
could
have
do is 15
associated
minutes.
it, right? Whatever that, but only 15 minutes, whatever that feeling is, that's the physical and mental association you would have had with pride, because that's the feeling that you cultivated, you know? So like uncoupling those.
Uncoupling them, because you're right. I might have, like, after a little bit of practice, might have said, oh yes, well, I went for 15 minutes, and there might have been like the tiniest emergence of a feeling of pride inside, but then immediately I would have squashed it with, but it was only 15 minutes. And like you said, the coupling of accomplishment and pride getting squashed with, well, it's still not enough.
Yeah. And I guess it must be true. It takes all sorts, right? So there must somewhere be people for whom that's somehow motivating, the squashing. But for me, it's totally defeating, you know? And it's also very natural. I think it's a natural way in the world, or in Western society at least, that we squash each other. You know, that's not unusual. And I think we can mistakenly think that's inspiring, or if it's inspiring for me and I put it on you and it's not inspiring, like, those are all important things to notice. So whatever response you feel in your body to these things is yours, and it's true. And you should dig into it and see if there's other stuff in there, and if you could be feeling better. And it's all just a big game of noticing and accepting and doing what feels truest and best.
Yeah. Well, what I have loved is being able to shift from being motivated by squashing to motivated from feeling what's possible for myself, trusting in the unfolding, being curious to follow my desire and interest, and like learning how to sense and feel pride if I make space for it. Like, I grew up where it, like, everything was like pushed, and I excelled, but I don't recall ever feeling very happy.
Yeah.
Or the happiness would last momentarily before I looked at the next goal that I had lined up for myself. And then it was like trudging through and doing the next thing. And so these practices gave me an opportunity to, like, it's almost like fueling myself with something different that's more sustainable, more friendly to the whole body, nervous system, and mind. And like, it helps me tap into, like, what about using excitement as fuel versus fear as fuel versus like the potential of someone shaming us or squashing us if we don't excel as fuel.
Right.
So
I think we can get so used to the comfort. There's something like dramatic, I want to say, getting out from underneath the squashing thumb or the squashing boot heel. That's a kind of energy, you know, that's a kind of mission. It's definitely something that you need to do. So there's no question about what to do next. Obviously, I have to get out from under this boot heel. And that feels like you're doing something, and you are, you know, and that can be fuel of a certain type. But I think we've mentioned a lot of times in the last few weeks this launching pad. It's the difference between like old gasoline and like rocket fuel. When you're, instead of having to be motivated by having to get out from underneath a big heavy rock, when you're just in a big open field of possibility and everything's there, that is a very different feeling of movement and what comes next. And you have access to a whole different array of possibilities and potential.
Yeah, this reminds me of when people come to us initially and they're like, I'm afraid though to be kinder to myself, to be more celebratory, because I'm afraid if I'm not hard on myself, I'll get nothing done. I'll accomplish nothing. I've lived that life before. And like, if I reflect back, I think that probably when that's one of our fears, we're actually just really tired people. We're tired people because we've been pushing through the whole time. We have trusted an old belief that says in order to accomplish and do well and succeed in life, you must always be pushed. Maybe sometimes even pushed and made to feel badly about yourself unless you achieve and accomplish. And it will feel weird in the beginning. You might not have actually a desire to be kinder to yourself because you're afraid that if you are, things will fall apart. And what I learned in that process is when we nurture ourselves and we learn to be kinder to ourselves and we do the body work that it takes to rewire some of those patterns and recuperate, I want to say, from a life of being pushed and using pushing and criticism and comparison and fear as the fuel, you're going to need some recoup time, some restorative time. And then that restorative time, you might finally lean into, okay, maybe I do need this. And then there's going to come a time where you're like, panic. But wait a second, it's too much restorative time. Nothing's happening still. I'm still getting nothing done. I'm still tired. And I think what we like to share with people is, are you willing to be patient and like just linger in this a little longer and trust the unfolding? Trust that this might be telling you that your body's not quite fueled up yet to run on this new source of energy. Right. I'm just jotting this down because I want to mention this. And at some point, when your capacity builds up again with clean fuel, desire is going to emerge. And the willingness to follow desire is going to be present. And the energy to follow desire is going to be present. And because all humans, unless there's like medically something going on, like we don't want to be a sack on the couch 24/7. We want to be engaged in life, right? But trusting that capacity has to be there. Yeah. And when I shifted from my old fuel source of pushing through, ignoring what my body needed, ignoring how I felt, wanting to succeed to earn validation and acceptance and belonging, I actually was functioning very well. Like if you looked at my life on paper from the outside, you would think this is a successful person. She's got it together. But I don't think I was very happy. I felt like my soul was dying on the inside. I was always exhausted. And I had to really question whether I wanted to continue that path or change it up. And where am I going with this? There was somewhere I was going with this. There was a time where I realized my old self got fueled by adrenaline and cortisol, like stress energy. That's what fueled me to get all this stuff done, to accomplish and achieve. And when I made that choice to shift away from that, I thought, okay, well, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to be kind to myself now. Let's practice that. I was so freaking exhausted. Like so exhausted. I would like finally have these like days on the calendar where I didn't have any like kids to take care of and I can get stuff done. Stuff that I really wanted to get done or hobbies I really wanted to invest time in. And I was like, yeah, no. And I was the lump on the log, like in bed for a long time. And I thought like, what the heck is wrong with me? And then those old fears would creep in. oh, see, maybe I do need to be hard on myself. Maybe like all I know is like going 1,000 miles an hour or like dead in a ditch, not actually dead in a ditch, like figuratively, like just collapsed. And I realized I need to learn how to cultivate energy in a different way now that I am not dependent on cortisol and adrenaline. So I need to learn how to nourish myself in all the ways, with food, with rest, with movement, with hydration, with healthy, supportive people in my life, right? And that takes time to become nourished from a new fuel source. But like when that happened, holy crap, like a whole new world opened up. And what I've noticed now is it's sustainable. There's a flow. Like I'm still busy. There's still times when I'm tired. But like the juice that runs through me is something very different. It's a very different feel. It's a very different flavor than the old juice.
Yeah, you don't have to dig it out of the ground and refine it. It's a natural wellspring that's just there.
Yeah. So,
yeah, that's huge.
That.
Well, that's making me think of like 80% preparation, 20% execution, you know?
Mm-hmm.
With this podcast, for example, with the work that we're doing, there's been a natural trajectory and we've trusted the time and the process. But that's not just like tra-la, just go trust the time and the process. It took years of work to come to a place where we could even understand what it means to trust the time and the process. And then to work through all the anxiety and the shoulds and the perfectionism and the too much and the not enough and all the reasons that kept us from wanting to share in the ways that feel good to share now. You know, that was a lot of preparation and a lot of clearing space for this to be possible for us.
Yes, I'm struck by you saying like to even get to wanting to share, right? Because you can get to a place where you're like, I'm wanting to share, yet I'm afraid to share. I'm wanting to share of myself, but I don't know how. And like in this process of like creating a podcast and putting it out here, like we actually started like at -1 or minus whatever because there were things in the way, old beliefs in the way, at least for me, that prevented me from even connecting to a desire to want to share myself. Like, why would I want to do that? If I share, I'm just opening myself up for criticism. So I don't want to have a podcast.
Yeah.
But that wasn't actually the truth. The truth was I was scared to be myself and share my gifts because I thought maybe people wouldn't see them as gifts or that people wouldn't agree and it would cause conflict and tension and judgment. So there was no want, actually. But that want emerged over time as we gave attention to some of the old beliefs that held us back in life.
Yeah. So many of those.
Mm-hmm.
One that is coming up right now, and I think we've both written little lists of the hurdles we had to sort of clear away, but I think this will be a really common one for everybody is, well, I've got something to say, but 8 million people are saying it, so why should I say it? And that's a super relatable feeling. And what helped me get past that was embracing the fact that it's true. There's lots of people saying these things. And then when I reflect on how many times I've needed to hear the same message and it didn't land until somebody said it in the certain combination of words or with their energy or in that moment or whatever it was. So, and how impactful that would be on me even. And then I think, gosh, I've heard that so many times. Why did it land this one time? And that's just like the perfection of this whole complex universe that I really feel comfortable now. And I used to feel totally adrift in understanding that I play my specific role in the symphony of life, and no one else can play that role. And that doesn't make it special or different in some way. It's just my particular unique thing that will land for exactly who it's meant to land for, and it won't for anybody else. And that's perfect. You know, that's the perfectionism I could have actually been striving for, is the perfectionism of like loving and trusting the moment and the process, instead of thinking I need to be perfectly refined and delivering a message that will touch all human beings in the most impactful way possible.
All my insides wanted to shrivel hearing you say that. I'm like, I don't want to be perfectionism personified and say the thing that strikes everybody. And, you know, I think I used to think that that's what I would need to be able to do to make any endeavor like this, like worth doing. But luckily that's changed. And I remember I had my own version of, there's 8 million people doing this already. They're, you know, talking about these things. Why add another voice? What's special about me? Right. And I could just as easily not share my voice and share my gifts, and the world would just do its thing and keep carrying on. And yet I think, you know, when I moved past the fear, and I don't mean like move past it in like I wasn't scared, when I explored what else was there other than fear, maybe like squashed down by fear, it was like, I really want to help people. Like I've always loved helping people. But I thought there's already enough people, maybe not enough. There's already so many people helping people. Why me? Why bother? And my brain does funny, weird things sometimes. And this is the analogy that came up for me. It was the ham sandwich. Did I ever tell you about the ham sandwich?
Sounds familiar.
Okay. I just thought there are many restaurants and delis and cafes that make ham sandwiches all over the world. And none of them think, you know what? It's dumb to make a ham sandwich. I'm never going to make a ham sandwich again because somebody else has already made it. And that example sort of made me laugh at how ridiculous that is. Imagine if every person, every company, every, you know, offering that's out there is like, well, there's already a car. Why make another car? There's already a bike. Why make another bike? You know, like there's already a t-shirt. Why make another t-shirt? People don't think like that. And there's people who want all different kinds of t-shirts. And I thought to myself, I have learned from so many people in my life who have imparted their wisdom, and it has touched me and changed my life so much. And yes, they might have all said similar things, sometimes maybe even the same thing in their own unique way. But like you said, it took that flavor at that timing to really make that impact in my life. Or sometimes I like to say, for example, a yoga class. I've gone to a gazillion yoga classes. A lot of them have been great. But everybody has a different style of how they teach. And there's certain times where like, sometimes it's a certain time, like this particular day, but sometimes it's a season in my life of what's going on in my life that I'm like, I would like more of this style, or I would like more of this style. And it doesn't mean I think one is not as valuable as the other, or one is worse and one is better. It's just what I need in the moment changes. And also what appeals to me may never appeal to somebody else. And so that's why I think if you have a gift to share, if you have something that has been pulling you and fear pulls you back, to consider this. Consider that there's lots of ham sandwiches already. You can make your own version of a ham sandwich. And someone I think told me this. They're like, there are a lot of people putting trashy things out into the world. Things that don't do humanity any good. Or maybe like pretend to or try to disguise as we're doing good, but maybe it doesn't come with a good intention, whatever. You want to share something that's not harming anyone from a well-intentioned place. The world actually needs more of that. Less of that doesn't help anybody. And more of that is not going to harm anybody. So if you're pulled, why not just go and do it?
Yeah.
And this reminds me of when we were in that time, maybe we'll talk a little bit about how the podcast was birthed. I remember someone sharing an acronym, HOPE, and it stood for Help One Person Every Day. And that made it small enough because I'm like, well, you know, am I going to say anything that's worth people listening to, like many people listening to? That felt like a lot of pressure and this question I didn't feel I could answer at the time. But when I asked myself, could I help one person every day? And would I want to? Would I want to do something that's a little bit uncomfortable for me, but deep down I know there's a bit of a yes here or a lot of a yes here? Would I be willing to lean into that if I could help one person every day? And I thought, help one person every day. That seems small enough. I could do that.
Nice.
Right? If I could help one person every day with this podcast and in a year help 375 people with something that makes them feel better, whether it's something long lasting and significant or whether it's just a moment of feeling better in their day about themselves or their life. Like, I like that feel.
Yeah.
I like that feel. I like that I'm rewriting my old patterns of belief of you need to be some sort of perfection before you can participate in the world.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I had opposite and similar feelings that in hindsight now I realize they were against each other, but it didn't matter because the predominant one was this urgent feeling, like what feels truly most important to me is helping people wake up to their painful patterns, their painful optional patterns and assumptions about themselves and life and the world. And that felt so urgent that I'm just like, we just have to go. Like, we've got to do this thing. We talk sometimes about me being the racing horse and you being the turtle. And so I'm like, let's go. And you're like, wait. I'm like, but we have to do the thing, you know? And so it doesn't matter that I don't know how to do it. We're just going and we'll figure it out sort of en route, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think by the time this rolled around for us, I think I had worked through enough of my perfectionist tendencies mm-hmm. to trust the moving forward. And I couldn't compute like the automatic perfectionism of assumption. So what I mean by that is I knew we were going to do it. I knew I didn't know how, but I couldn't change the vision that was impossible to achieve. I didn't care. It was like, we're doing it anyway. It'll look whatever way it looks. But I can't see past my idea of like what a podcast on YouTube is supposed to look like. And I'm like, there's no way I can accomplish that. We need multiple camera angles. We need like a professional lighting and editing crew. Like we don't have that. And so now I have to do that. I'm like, well, I can't. So I won't. But the vision didn't really shift. Like that idea of what it should look like is still intact, and it just doesn't matter that it's something else. That makes mm-hmm. sense.
So are you saying you still have a how it should look, but you're not letting that dictate whether you just go and do the thing anyways?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I like that because sometimes we think I got to change the vision. I got to say, well, let's just lower expectations and be like, we don't need a camera crew. We don't need an editor. We just slap it together and see what happens. And we're like, okay, because I changed the expectations, it seems more doable. So now I'll do the thing. That's one approach, right? And I think what you're saying is, well, I didn't actually change the vision or the idea, or maybe it's shifted over time, but like it's pretty concrete there of how it might be great if this podcast looked a certain way or sounded a certain way, or it should, blah, blah, blah. But you decided to not let that part of you drive the bus. And you're like, I'm just going to do it anyways. We're just going to slap it together anyways and put it out there and know that it was well intended. And whoever it resonates with, it resonates with. And if it can help one person a day, then hallelujah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that. I love that there's different pathways to accomplishing, to creating, to moving forward in life.
Yeah. And I love that you've highlighted this because I think there are so many areas of life in the past and probably the present where I let go of the best possible outcome or hope because it's not immediately achievable.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that I haven't let that go for this, and that it isn't the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is big for me, perfectionism. Like, I grew up with, if you can't do it well, don't bother. And it like, feel like held me back, held me down, felt like like I was imprisoned for a long time. I didn't attempt to do a lot of things. I didn't try a lot of things because there was this, holy crap, like, I don't think I can do that well. I don't even know how to do it. So let's not even entertain that. And it got to a level even worse than that. I think it's not even, let's not even entertain that. Let's just pretend I don't even have a desire to do that.
Right.
Right. Let's just like act like I don't care. And that's not something I would ever want anyways. In order to like protect myself of like, well, if I don't want it, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work out. I never wanted it anyways. And, you know, I feel like we've really allowed this to unfold in the way that it has without making any of it wrong. I think what we've been really good at doing is letting actions match capacity and trusting the unfolding and knowing, hey, we have a vision to share our voices here in an attempt to help people learn how to be more accepting and kinder to themselves and grow their trust in themselves and in the world. And it will take the time that it takes. It will come in the form that it comes. But for example, today I have capacity to sit here and talk for an hour, or maybe an hour and a half. And that's all I need to know. And that's all I'm going to do. And we did that. And now we're like 100 episodes into it. And it was never, let's make this huge plan. And we need to be able to do it, like run out of the gates and do it at 110%. Because if you're not going to do it that way, like what's the point? And if, you know, this has been such a healing journey actually, because it's rewritten so many old beliefs, right? Of how you're supposed to get something done, how you're supposed to create. That even sounds wrong, putting that all in one sentence, how you're supposed to create. But like, we really honor timing and pacing and capacity. We held on to the vision of, we want to help people and we don't need to know how, and we'll figure it out along the way. And we kept taking actions, big or small. Like, that's what it was really about.
Yeah, it was for sure. What about, so when we started doing this work together, which led us to this podcast, it was a really in-depth shadow work training designed to help us see all the ways in which we defend ourselves, from ourselves, from each other, from the world. And that informed so much of how we got to now as well, right? All of the stuff that we all hold until someone helps us take our hand and walk us towards it and shine a light on it and be with it together with us. And the stuff that stuck out for me, and some of my favorite activities in conscious relationship and women's group, were these things that illuminate how silly my self notions were, you know? Mm-hmm. I was too much. And inevitably, so people come forward for that question. Do you feel too much in any way? Oh, yes. And yet you also feel not enough. Oh, yes, definitely. I am simultaneously so special and different that, you know, don't look at me. Your eyes will burn. And yet I'm not special or different enough to have anything worthwhile for anyone to listen to, you know, all of these contradictions. Which I didn't even know were there. You know, they would all limit me, but I didn't know they were there at all. And I didn't know that they also contradicted each other. And how easy it can be to release these things when you see them, when somebody shines a light on that kind of stuff.
Really, the believing that I'm too much or not enough I'm just going to boil it down to I suck. I suck, so nothing's worth doing, nothing's worth trying. Like that would have been how I worked with those two beliefs. I don't think I really thought that I sucked. I wouldn't walk around and say, like, I think I suck. Definitely believing that I'm too much or not enough led to stagnation and not opening up to possibility, right? I'm curious what some of the too much and not enoughs were when it came to the decision to create and launch a podcast.
I think that I was pretty much past that by the time podcast option rolled around. But I definitely had the not wanting to be on camera, like I'm not symmetrical enough, or like maybe I'll say things that are fill in the blank, like misplaced, too loud, too of whatever, language, word choice not being something that every single human loves. A bunch of impossible to control for sorts of things. Yeah, I really think that I believed that whatever we had to say, in whatever way we had to say it, in whatever timing, would land for who it would, and then that's enough, So I don't think it really played too much of a factor at that point, which is really nice to look back and realize.
This reminds me that, like, I think probably you were a little bit ahead of me in that place. I think if we looked at where we were both at in terms of self-expression and taking up space in the world when we first met, and even like when we started the podcast, and I know there's nuance here, but my experience of you is you felt more comfortable in that place than I did. And what's been really neat is, and this has shown up in many different ways, and we'll touch on the different ways it's shown up, but we held a similar vision of we want to support people, we want to help people. We also held a common belief, and this belief, at least on my part, took a long time to get to. I have something to offer. I have something to offer that I think can be supportive to people. And then there were all these things that we didn't always fully match on in the same quantity, in the same accessibility to it, in the same timing of it. So in one way, I feel like you held more belief, like it's okay to speak up. It's okay to take up space. And I was still like, I just like doing my thing, helping people behind the scenes in the basement. Like, let's not put ourselves out there that much. And I was like really concerned with like, what did I say? Was it helpful? Was it useful? Am I going to say anything that offends anyone? And I feel like you were more comfortable in that area to not let that consume too much of your mind or let it really stop you from being more fully expressed. But what was neat is that we could do that together.
Yeah. And trust each other's timing and process. Yeah. I want to say that I think there's something like slightly rigid and neurodivergent about my shamelessness. So it's not just like I'm just comfortable. It's that I saw enough instances of me trusting what I had to say because it was an exercise that I was told to do and see what happens, right? So the exercise is say whatever comes, trust, if it's not landing right now, it's landing in the future. Like there's some reason, there's some larger spiritual sort of reason. And I tested that enough times that I had enough evidence that I'm rigid in that now. There's not a lot of room for distrusting imperfection. Like it's all perfect to me. So I feel like adamant about that, and that now manifests in my life. Whatever you have to say is perfect for what it is.
Yeah, I think there's some element of that that we both cultivate. Maybe we get to it in different ways, but of trusting that also allows us to do this thing and do it together and thrive in it, because I've never found you to be oppressive of me or needing or wanting me to show up in a certain way. And I don't think I've exuded that to you. I don't know if we haven't actually talked about it really, but I don't think that you've gotten that feeling from me.
Definitely not.
So there's no policing of each other, even energetically. There's no policing like, oh my gosh, she better not say something like this or that, or do something like makes us look so stupid or dumb. It's really been trusting that like what happens will happen. If there's something that turned out not okay, was harmful in some way, we'll learn from it, we'll repair it, we'll carry on. But this is a podcast about learning that it's okay to be human.
Yeah.
And I think we both bring that energy to the table with each other, and like for you who's listening. And I think the nice takeaway from this is like, imagine if you're doing friendship or relationship or a work relationship where you both just get to be human. There's no policing of each other. There's just this trust in we have a common goal and we're moving towards that common goal in the best way that we can with the resource we have at that particular time. And how much smoother and more fun collaboration and co-creation and working together would be.
Totally.
And that makes me think of like where there were some where there's commonality in our vision and our purpose, right? There were some discrepancies sometimes in like capacity, like time. I don't have that much free time. I never have had that much free time in this whole podcast life, these 2 years. And yet I could make enough time that there would be an episode every week, which is what we committed to each other. And you had access to more time. And I was just wondering if you could share, like, what is that experience like for you, where we have a shared vision, where that we're like moving towards it together, but we're not at the same place in terms of our capacity for time. Like, what comes up for you? How do you stay connected to the vision and the purpose when it's not on your time frame, maybe?
For sure, holding the vision. Like, it's very clear to me what we want to do, and it's very clear to me the magic that you have and the magic that we have together. It's also, I think, aside from our shared vision, we have a shared way we want to feel, which I'll just narrow down to calling ease and flow, right? We've only ever wanted this to feel easeful. This is one of the magic pieces we have together, is that when we do this stuff together, it doesn't feel like work in any way. It comes easily, it flows easily, and that's what we wanted to kind of ride the wind of. So partly it's because it would be easy for a person to feel resentful if they were contributing more time than somebody else was, right? To make that mean something. And those kinds of transactional relationships or projects, I think, is a pretty natural way for people to do things, but I don't think it generally feels very good, So first of all, it's knowing what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And it's knowing my own capacity and agreeing to do and offering to do things that actually feel good for me to do. I'm not going around agreeing to spend a bunch of time and energy that I don't have because I think things need to be a certain way, Yeah. And I think there was probably a time toward the beginning where I was kind of falling into that. And then we had this beautiful conversation and you came up with the horse and turtle analogy, and like we revisioned together, I think, and grounded in this beautiful project. So what it's like for me is it brings up old transactional stuff that I now know not to be true. It doesn't feel true for me.
Right. In that, when you say it doesn't feel true to me, do you mean I don't want to live life that way. I don't want to be led in what I do from places like this belief that everything's transactionary.
Yeah. I don't want to keep tabs. I don't want to decide that, a certain time commitment has an equal or different, whatever the story is, amount of value.
Yeah. I remember sort of that season of the podcast, when we were sort of just dipping our feet in, trying to learn, trying to figure out how to do this thing. And I think as I moved out of a way of life of always being overly concerned about people and protective of people and wondering whether they're okay, like I really leaned into, I'm going to assume they're fine. Like as long as I'm showing up in a way that's not like a jerk, right? It's well-intentioned. I'm going to assume they're fine and good with things unless they say otherwise. And it doesn't mean I would never check in, but I think I was just learning to trust that it's not my job to like be digging in and checking in 1,000 times. Like, are you okay? Are you sure? Are you whatever? And so I think there might have been a time where I assumed all was good. And I don't think any was bad, but we had a conversation because it was really important to me because I knew there was a time discrepancy in how much time we could each put in. It was really important to me, like in my inner knowing, but I don't know if I had verbally said it that clearly to you yet until that conversation of, I really only want you to do the stuff that lights you up. And I might have been under the impression that you enjoy doing these things. And if you don't, it would make me feel really yucky to think that you think you have to do these things. So can we figure out what it is that feels good for you to do, that's exciting for you to do, and we'll figure out the rest. And between the two of us, we'll just find a way that feels best so that both of us can be doing things we love. And from that place, something beautiful is created.
That is such an important lesson for all humans. If we slow down enough to notice, we actually want people around us to feel good and to feel lit up. And we don't want people to have to do a bunch of things they don't want to do. And then to be able to own that for yourself, and just to say, this doesn't light me up. Or like, I'll do this thing that I don't love doing because it serves this greater purpose that feels really good to me. If we don't slow down enough to notice those things happening in our body, we can't do anything like that,
Yeah, and you just do the thing and then end up being resentful. And then when someone asks you, hey, what's wrong? It's either nothing, I'm fine, or you actually can't articulate what's wrong because we haven't sat with it enough to know where you're going against your truth.
Yes.
Right? And I think what's really helped in this, like, we're not talking about not being transactional when like you're the only one ever doing the work and someone else does nothing to contribute. We're not talking about, we just never have to do anything we don't enjoy and someone else will pick up the slack. We're talking about having faith and trust here with whoever we're working with, in partnership with, whether it's intimate relationship or work or friendship or family, that like we're well-intentioned and share a vision. And on top of that, I'll add, I see what you bring to the table and I value what you bring to the table in the way that you bring it to the table. And like I say that because you and I have very like similar interests and skills and also very different ones and complementary skills and interests. And you can't quantify it all. Like it's not like hours and numbers and, whatever. And I think what we've been really good at that's helped us from falling into being transactional or getting resentful is that we see that we both have some strengths that bring in something of value to the creation of this podcast. And that without this person and what they bring in, it just wouldn't be the same. And we trust that the other person is going to continue to bring what they can. And when they can't, they'll let us know and we'll work with that. But like, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, when you value what the other person brings, you don't need it to be exactly what you bring. And I see this a lot in working with couples who are just at each other because they haven't learned the skill of, one, what is their common vision? Two, can you learn to celebrate what each of you is really good at and what you bring in? And can you learn to value that and see that collectively? That makes a really great thing and a much stronger thing. And I think we do that well. And I think that's what makes this not feel like work at all. We're just both showing up as ourselves, bringing in, like, contributing to a vision that matters to us. And so it just works.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yeah. Like, if you've never come to me with, I put X amount of hours in, because you do a lot of the work behind the scenes that make it possible. Like, it wouldn't be possible. Right. I could learn how to do those things. I don't know how to do those things yet, but like, they take time. They take hours of time. And like, you could be like, well, G hasn't invested the same number of hours in editing the podcast, creating it, and doing all the back end stuff. And it's totally accurate. But like, the things that I do that allow for this thing to be a thing, that it gets listened to by the people it gets listened to, are things that I do in other times that we wouldn't call podcast related. And yet they impact the success of this podcast and who it reaches. And so I think it's just really like heartwarming to me that we don't have to work in a transactional way.
Right.
I have been in friendships where I can feel it's transactional, where it's been like, well, I know the thinking because we've had conversations. Well, I called you once and you haven't called me yet, so you're the person who should call next. I've done this 3 times and you've only done it twice, and so it must mean you don't like me or you don't value our friendship. And I'm like, man, that's hard to keep track of. That hurts my head. Like, yeah, doesn't feel good to operate that way. And I just don't enjoy operating that way. And at the same time, if anyone were ever working with me or in relationship with me and they felt like I wasn't putting in my share for whatever reason, I would want to hear that. I would want to know, and I would want to find a resolution. Right. But like, to run out of the gates operating off of like a transactional relationship, like, that feels yucky to me.
Yeah. I'm sure, at least in some areas of my life, I've operated in a very transactional way, because I didn't know any other way to act. I didn't know how to measure my own value and contribution, or how to appreciate the other person's. This is reminding me of 90 Day Fiancé.
Of course. I feel like, could you one day make a reel compilation of every episode clip where you say, this is reminding me of 90 Day Fiancé? And then you should like pair it with whatever my facial expression is. I'm wondering whether my facial expression is the same every time or different.
Joyful anticipation. Yeah. Unsurprised. There's a couple where they're living in a van and they're going across Europe, and it's this wonderful dream where, you know, they've dreamed all the things you would expect to dream about living in a van, driving across Europe, where you like living in a van. That's important. My dream would not involve that. But the one has a full-time job that she does remotely. She works 10 hours a day on the days that she works. And you can see from her perspective, this means that her partner should be putting in an equivalent 10 hours a day, doing whatever it is to contribute to their life together. But the partner who doesn't have the job is going like, but I don't have a job. Like, you're doing your job because you have a job. and I don't have one. So why would I need to do anything related to having a job? Like, I'll do what needs to be done, but there's still freedom, and they just have totally different perspectives on that. And they're unable to articulate it because they don't know that this is a thing that exists, So when you're describing transactional friendships, like I feel like there's these different levels of experience in it, where what we have is this ultimate love and trust and freedom. Freedom is like a big feeling here, where I'm free and I'm cared for in that. Mm-hmm. Then there's the thing that you were describing. Like, if we knew that about ourselves, we could say, well, I've put in 10 hours, so now you need to put in 10 hours. That's another level of feeling experience in friendship. And then there's the thing these 90-day fiancé people are doing where they're unaware of it. It's unconscious, so they can't even articulate it, but all those vibes are there,
Yeah, the pissed offness is there, and the you make no frickin' sense is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And why can't you just this and that,
And then you just argue in circles around what it's not even about.
Yeah. And you feel trapped and stagnant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're here to remind you life can feel different.
Yeah.
Right? This reminds me of with someone I was in a relationship with before. He had the audacity to take a nap. Nap when I was cooking dinner. And I was furious. And this was at a time with, I realize now, I never gave myself permission to take naps or ask for help.
Yeah.
So of course I'm furious with him if he takes a nap.
And were you cooking because you felt impassioned to cook, or because you felt like you had to?
I felt like I had to. I had children to feed.
Yeah. Yeah. See, now I've got a friend who would just be like, no, I'm miserable. I don't want to be doing this. So you need to be miserable too. And that's like refreshing. At least you know what's going on. You're saying it. You're not really serious, but.
Yes. Like, that's helpful in that it's clear and you can have something to work with together. But mine was just huffing and puffing and eye rolling and chopping things a little bit louder than necessary under my breath, being like, I can't believe you're freaking having a nap. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. So transactional,
Yeah. Super transactional. Yeah.
And the thing is, transactional, transactional with blindfolds on. Right? With like whatever those things are on horses where you just have a narrow vision.
Yeah.
Because of course I wasn't thinking of all the ways he was contributing.
Yeah.
Right? Outside of that nap time.
Yeah.
I was just thinking in this moment.
In this moment.
It exemplifies everything.
Yeah.
I'm the one who contributes everything to this relationship, obviously.
Yeah. It's a sneaky ego unconscious salve for the simple irritation of feeling put upon about having to make dinner. It flares up into all these enormous things,
Mm-hmm. And that I'm never allowed to rest.
Right.
Right? That was the belief I held. I'm never allowed to rest. And who do you think you are resting?
Yeah. So there's that transactional stuff. These are hurdles we had to get over in order for this podcast to be possible. And we wouldn't have known that. We wouldn't have had like, okay, here's a checklist. How do we get the podcast started? Well, we have to get over the hurdle of not being transactional with each other's time and energy,
Yeah. A lot of beliefs needed to shift about ourselves, each other, the world. We had to learn a lot of skills, and Steph and I were talking before we press record of like, when I look back, the skills that we needed to learn, they're just skills you can pick up and learn and figure out off YouTube or ask some people or whatever. Like, that wasn't actually the barrier. Like, skills are usually skills are learnable. They're not actually the barrier. Like, how you will do it, you will figure it out. Right? It's do you believe it's possible? Do you believe that your vision is worth staying connected to? Right? Do you believe that if you take one action after another in the direction of this vision, something will happen and momentum will take over. And then allowing and trusting for timing and capacity. And I want to circle back to capacity and talk about this bit, in that if we want to, actually there are, I think, I signed up for a course about, how do you create a podcast? We listen to things, we learn some things, but ultimately we fell back on these principles we're talking about right now. It wasn't a checklist. There are some people who operate well with checklists. And if you are one of those people, hallelujah for you. We aren't really like that. I've discovered over time that I'm not really like that. I could accept if you're not like that, because, you can be you. But I think I used to force myself into thinking I should be like that. I should look at the people who are successful at their podcasts and do what they do and take the steps they took to do the thing. And it should be at that pace and with that intensity and with that enthusiasm. And I'm like, man, I got barely time in my life. I'm tired. I just have a vision to help people. Right? And what I noticed is I had capacity and time to commit to recording once a week, or enough so that we could have one episode a week. I did not have time or mental emotional capacity or even the belief work done yet enough to say, well, there's certain things you're supposed to do when you launch a podcast and you want lots of people to know about it. And there's certain things you're supposed to do to get the algorithms to do whatever by getting so many listens by this point in the first week, because blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I don't have interest, capacity, anything for any of that. And what I'm proud of us for is not letting that stop us.
Yeah.
Say, what I have capacity for is to record one episode for every week. And we still haven't really promoted this podcast. The energy hasn't been there. The timing hasn't been the thing we're prioritizing. But we still create it. We still put this out there. We still know one day the other parts will emerge. And when they do, we'll follow that emergence. And we'll trust the unfolding and the timing. And I love that we didn't have to do it a certain way. We didn't have to have capacity or our belief system ready to do it a particular way before we just did something.
Yeah,
and we did something every week. Yeah. We did something through, I had long COVID, you had a housemate situation, you had a house move, you had renovations, there were family emergencies, so many things we went through in the last 2 years. And this podcast has never been a stressor.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. It has never been a stressor, and we've still been able to be consistent with it. And I think it's our vision of this has a purpose, this has a value out in our lives and in the lives of others. So let's stay committed. But it's also never been let's stay committed. We should stay committed. It just flows.
We just are committed. Right? Yeah.
And I think that if anything ever needed to change, this is what I love about where I'm at right now in life, where I don't feel it has to be perfect. And I'm talking about the podcast, but also about everything. And I don't feel like I have to force it. And I also feel like if it needs to change for whatever reason, it will change. Whether it's some change that happens externally that we can't control, or a change we feel we have to make because the way it's happening is no longer sustainable or doesn't light us up. To be able to sit here and say, I'm comfortable with all of that feels wild to me, because there would have been a time where I wouldn't have been comfortable with any of those parts of the thing. So, yeah. Yay us.
Yay us. Yeah. Yay us. I think so much of the learning we did about how to stuff really boiled down to a giant reframing in our minds. And the reframing was, you can't to sure you can. It's no big deal. I'm thinking of Kathy Heller, who I think we did some of her workshops or programs. And the message I took from that, in fact, the only thing I actually remember is you can do it in your closet on your phone.
I love it. And I have this thing with like online programs, and it's really funny. Like, you could deem me as a terrible online program student because I rarely finish the actual curriculum. And you could deem me an amazing online program student because for me, I can tell I just need the belief that's possible and that I just need to start. And that's what I take away from these things. And what I realize is, at least in those seasons of my life, I sense it changing a little bit as I change my relationship to structure. But like, there's just a lot of resistance to doing things like a certain way in a certain order. And like, yuck. Like, I thought that's what I needed and what would work. And every time I'm confronted with, gee, you don't operate like that. Just take what you need from what they're saying and then go do it your own way. And
what a great thing to know about yourself.
Yeah.
It's liberating. Yeah.
It's been fun. It's been fun. And this began because rumblings started because we did a lot of pre-work, like you were talking about. Must have been in a kayak or on a paddleboard or something, right? When we had this idea of like, maybe a podcast. And both of us felt like the yes to that. And I think, like you said, we'd done enough work to that point where a yes wasn't met immediately, like with a but how. And we were like, it's a yes. I guess we're going to have podcasts one day. Like, that's what we left that paddleboard and kayak with. That was the message. That's all. We didn't know how. We didn't know when. We were like, that's all we knew. And we were okay knowing just that.
Yeah. You can feel the feeling of a seed is planted. And it's like, I don't know what kind of a seed it is. I just need to water it sometimes.
Yeah. And then we'd water it a little bit more. And then we'd water it a little bit more. And then like, it's turning into a little garden or a nice plant.
Yeah.
And like, I think it can turn into like really amazing things. And we're excited for what happens beyond 100 episodes. And I think that's the other thing too, is we trusted the timing. Like, we haven't had a single guest on this show. A lot of podcasts thrive. No. We have had guests we've had people do call in and like Q&A.
Yeah.
Right. But we don't think we've had like a guest in like what podcasters typically, categorize as a guest on a show. And part of that was like, we wanted to just really be in our own energy and feel our own way through and have a little bit of our own sense of identity here before we played in the mixing of energies and people and ideas.
Well, and letting it emerge, right? Like, I think you and I are both comfortable knowing that we need to let something happen for a while for it to reveal what it is,
Yes. And then, last week we had the conversation after we, stopped recording of like, it might be time. We might be feeling that thing. Like, it's time, like, have a guest or two, or start doing that thing. And then universe delivers and like stars align and these guests will come and it's starting to like unfold. And the excitement is there to open that door. Like, the excitement was not there to open that door in the beginning. It just felt stressful and more to do.
It would have been pressure.
Right. And so we're like, let's track that. It feels stressful and more to do. This isn't the timing for it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been really such a learning journey because it's all been about trust, and it's all been like, I want to say this, maybe this is the last thing, but it's this thing we have a shared vision on, and we've been doing together. We've been committed to it together. But not just on time availability did we have discrepancy. There's probably been times where one of us has had more excitement about it than the other. One of us has had more ideas about it than the other. And like, we haven't been at that same level all the time throughout in all of these categories. And what I love is that it's been okay. And like the visual I had in my mind is like, we're running a race. Like, it's not actually a race, but for the analogy of like, sometimes one person has a burst of energy and they run ahead a little bit. And the other one's like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. I'm going to take it easy. And then all of a sudden that burst of energy comes and then they speed up a little. Or the other person's like, yeah, I want to rein it in and like hang back a little. And they meet up again. Like, oh, hey, how's the race? Oh, going good. Yeah, yeah. And then they do their own thing again. And then, you know, like there's room in this to have a shared vision, yet go at our own pace. And that's what I really love. And so many of you, I assume, are not sitting here planning to record your podcast, but maybe you are. But you might be able to relate this to your life, where you have a partner or a friend or a colleague where you share a similar vision and goal. And the question is, are you willing to allow each other to have a little bit of a different pace and approach throughout the journey and trust that you're still in it together?
That to me is where spaciousness and freedom and love comes from. You know, that's the vibe. And it's definitely not something that I was conditioned for, and that I think many of us are conditioned for in modern Western culture. So making that's a job to do. That's a hurdle to tear down, to discover for yourself where you're feeling like things have to be a certain way, where you're feeling put upon, where you're not sharing of what you actually want and what would feel good and what you have the capacity for. This has been a big exercise in that. And it's such a good parallel for romantic relationship. It's unbelievable, especially long term. Like when you're getting to know somebody. Well, this is actually kind of a parallel too. If I had done my racing horse doing all the shoulds thing, it would have been, well, we need to have guests because that's what people do. And then in inviting those guests, I would have been having to explain why this is good and why they should come. And instead, we've left the time and space and things have unfolded naturally. And we're able to say, like, this is what it is. If it suits you, come on down. If it doesn't, don't. But there's nothing to prove. There's good, positive, strong feelings and feedback that's not feeding my ego. You know, I think even in the past with all those shoulds, it would have been like, oh yes, people like it. Good. You know, I have value. And now it's just like, oh, great. Like really, it helped one person. Great.
Yeah. I love that you're highlighting this racehorse thing. And maybe before that, I want to say, it feels really good to say to someone, this is what we're up to. If it lights you, like we'd be delighted if you wanted to join us on in a conversation on the podcast. And if it lights you up, that idea to join us, then let us know. And to like really be open-hearted and like connected to our desire for it and unattached and like not taking it personally, whatever someone decides. Like that feels like such a good place to be extending to someone, to be inviting someone in. And I'm proud of ourselves for that, because there would have been a time where it wasn't like that, right? It was, and then the racehorse thing. I think if you would have allowed the racehorse energy, and what we mean by that is like Steph can get an idea and just like run with it and like go full tilt. And I love that about you. And it excites me. And also I think what would have happened is I probably would have felt like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up. I can't live up to your expectations. Like maybe we shouldn't do this at all. Or like maybe you should do this with someone else. Or like maybe this was a dumb idea, like to begin with. And it was really neat for us to see like in what ways we can learn from each other and embrace sort of lost parts of ourselves. And that I was so afraid to be the racehorse because I wanted to get it right and get it just perfect. Right. So that was a little bit of how I ended up being the turtle. But at the same time, there's certain things that I value about doing well. Right. And I had to learn, like, where's the nuance of like putting time in and trusting the process and allowing something to be done well and not having that become your, like the thing that imprisons you so that you do nothing because you're so worried that it's not perfect. So, I could imagine if I let the turtle side run the show, you'd probably be like, I'm out of here. Like, nothing's happening. I don't know. What do you imagine would happen if Turtle ran the show?
Yeah, we both had to balance, I think, that. And I love that we knew that and we're like able to be conscious and intentional about it. Yeah, if it was all turtle, nothing would be happening. And if it was all horse, it would just be a piece of crap with the intention. There's no time when you're racing on a horse for like intention and ease and flow to catch up, There's, and I think there's also important times to sink into horse or turtle.
Yes.
Horse is a skill that's appropriate to deploy sometimes. And there's times where it feels good and true to go full gallop. Yeah. And that's also my natural tendency, which often is misplaced. I have to notice like, oh, this is horse time or this is not horse time, and be with those feelings, that rushing urgency. If I've got like, those are real big feelings that need to be dealt with. And especially from a family where it's like, go, how are you going to do this thing? How are you going to do that thing? What's next? To pause and slow down in that and feel what's true is really a large shadow work and personal growth challenge that I think a lot of people experience.
I think what helped us, and this is like a reminder, is like the importance of like you and I, when I brought that analogy up, could both own and laugh about it. Like, oh yes, I am the turtle. Oh yes, I am the racehorse. Right. And maybe not in every way, not all the time, but like we could see those parts within ourselves that were like sort of running the show or like activated in that moment or in that experience. And our ability to like not feel shameful about it, to just be like, oh yeah, that part's really showing up right now. And like, we didn't judge each other for it. It wasn't like, what the heck is wrong with you? Why do you have to have so much urgency and everything? And you weren't like, what the heck's wrong with you? Like, why does everything have to be perfect? And can we just get the thing done? And like, like there was never this attack energy or judgment energy. It was just like, those parts are really showing up right now. And I think the next part was, how can we value and appreciate both of those parts? And how can we find a way where they get to work together, right? Which moments are going to be helpful to use racehorse energy? Which moments are helpful to be in that turtle energy a little bit more? And when we work with couples, that's where magic happens, is when they can see their situation from that lens, right? And work together in that way. Yeah.
One of the things we talk about a lot in groups and encourage people to ask themselves frequently throughout the day is, how can I be 1% more comfortable right now? And I think one of the things that I value most about our working relationship and how we approached this podcast was really checking in about ease and flow. Does this still feel the way you want it to feel, and we're both people who we're both emotional, but we didn't know that, and the question of how do you want to feel, I think we would have had rote responses to that, but we wouldn't have been able to notice it in our bodies when those feelings were absent or do anything about it.
Yeah, for sure. And like, in order to have the courage and willingness to ask someone who you care about, how does this feel for you? Does this still feel good for you? Is anything feeling off for you? It takes courage, because our old programming for some of us would have us assume that if they weren't feeling good, it was our fault. And it was also our responsibility to make it better. And some of that might mean I then must have to let go of the thing I want in order for them to feel better. Right. And I think both of us have practiced enough that those things weren't running the show. That fear of like, you know, you're going to be unhappy and it's going to be my fault. Like, it didn't cross my mind. It's just, I'm just curious. Like, are you still feeling good? Does this still excite you? Do we need to tweak anything? And like, it sounds like an easy thing to do. It sounds like a thing that makes sense to do. But there's often a lot of stuff we need to work through and become aware of and like shift to see that I actually might never want to ask that question. Or even if I ask it, I might never really be able to let it land fully, where I can use the information in a spacious and constructive way.
Yeah.
So
I think I wouldn't have been able to ask that question in the past because my assumption would be that you're not happy and you're not saying anything and you're not going to, and someday you'll just leave out of nowhere.
Yeah, right. I'm sort of giggling because I get it, right? And there might have been a time where you're afraid to ask or you ask, but you don't trust the answer from the other person. It doesn't matter what they say, right? And so in that case, like, I just feel like, what's the point of asking?
Yeah.
Right? There's other foundational work and healing to do so that you can actually hear what the person's saying and trust that even if that's not their truth, you're going to take it as the truth because they're sharing it as the truth. And if there's fallout from that, then that's going to be a cause and effect that person has to deal with.
Yeah. And I think it's part of the process of learning trust. It's one of these you go first and the universe follows instances where, like, if you're in a place where you don't know if you can trust what people are saying, start by trusting what they're saying. Just go with that and things will transform. Like, that's one of the beautiful relationship dance shifts where I start speaking the truth. I start assuming you're speaking the truth. And even if that's not where we're at right now, eventually it will evolve into that because that's all there's room for. That's all you're leaving room for.
It makes me think of, I think we were going to come back to recording an episode on this. Things that were a waste of time.
Yes. So, can we do that?
Right?
I think we did that last week.
We thought were a waste of time.
Oh, yes. Nuance.
So I think an episode on things that were actually, in hindsight, we see they were a waste of time. I would put this in that bucket of like spending time, like wondering whether someone is being honest and telling the truth and trustable. Like, when are you going to get a sufficient answer that you firmly believe you can trust? You know, and learning to invest in growing a set of different skills that don't make you at the mercy of someone else.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gigi Bedeman.
Yes.
I'm getting hungry and sleepy.
Okay.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling just right. I'm feeling just right. And I notice my hands, and my hands say, yay, we did the thing. And it's time.
It's time. Very good. Okay. So anything else you want to say before we do a closing practice for our 100th episode?
Did you hear that beeping?
No.
It was the beeping on this heater that I have on that's nicely toasting me. And I was concerned that it was going to beep during our recording. And so I set it for more time. And then as we do, we keep talking. And it beeped right as you said that. And I feel like it's a sign. It's a sign. It's like a celebratory beep. It's time. It's time. You said all that there is to say. 100 is done.
Amazing. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What a life. What a world.
Yes.
You said you had a closing practice in mind. Do you remember what it was?
Yes, we are going to wag our tails.
Oh, wag our tails.
You can wag your tail sitting. You can wag your tail standing. And I would like to think that you can also wag your tail laying.
Oh, yeah. You can wag. You can wag even if you don't have use of your body. And I want to suggest that when you meet a wagging dog, I immediately start wagging. If that's something you haven't tapped into yet or you're repressing, please let the wag out. The happy dog wags.
I'm going to pay attention more to that because I've never, like, yes, sometimes I notice a dog wagging their tail, but I'm not like syncing up to their wagging. So
yeah. Well,
I'm going to try that out.
This is a way that we don't celebrate as often as we could be, right? There's a dog that's happy to see you. How many times do we just not even notice that? We like just talk to the human, the dog's looking up at us like, hey.
Yeah. And then I don't know if you would consider this even sadder, but like just as sad is sometimes there's a human excited to see us and we can't even see it or feel it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So notice the people and the animals and the beings out there that are happy to see you. And like you're so intent on getting down to business or in your own world and in your own mind about whether they're happy to see you or not, that it doesn't even register, and allow that to register for a moment longer. Linger in it, enjoy it, right? Catch when people and animals are happy to see you.
Right? Meeting people with love is a wonderful opportunity to practice celebrating.
Yes. Yeah. I love that sentence. And like part of me laughs because I'm like, I wonder if the Steph from like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whenever we met, if those words would have been uttered out of your mouth with that tone and intention.
I'd say no. And probably I would still have been wagging at dogs, but all the people could probably more or less go to hell. I don't feel that way anymore.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Life feels better when you don't want everyone to go to hell, I think.
Yeah. It does.
Since we're needing to coexist with fellow humans.
Yeah. I think I wag now when I see my friends also. I'm going to have to pay more attention to this. I'm a natural wagger. Okay. I'm a dog.
That's really what it is. The funny thing is I'm a horse in Chinese zodiac.
Oh, and I'm a monkey.
I can see that.
Yeah, no surprise there. All right. We've been talking forever. I'm shutting her down for episode 100. Amazing. Right. Thank you guys for being here. And as always, please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. We'll see you next time.